Greetings, CATDC, and welcome to our online update. I know that all of you are getting your school years underway and you're thinking so much about the learning of your students, but I want you to also think about your own learning and growth over the course of this year. And today we have two facilitators of one of our ongoing groups, and I feel that our ongoing groups are one of the best ways that we as an organization can support educators in our schools to grow, to stretch, and to bring more to their students ultimately. So today we're talking to the facilitators of our group, Designing Assessment for Learning and Equity. Mark Boswell and Regan Galvan are both deeply committed educators of both young people and adults. Mark is a self-described historian at heart. He's taught history for well over a decade and currently works as assistant head of the upper school at Marin Country Day. And he's also a consultant for educators and coach around grading more equitably and making education more accessible for all students. He also works closely with Joe Feldman, author of Grading for Equity. There was standing room only at POCC last November when Mark presented with Joe, and I was glad to be there. Regan Galvan serves as Director of Teaching and Learning at Vistamar School, and before joining Vistamar, Regan advised students, taught math, history, and choral music at both public and independent schools 6 through 12 in Southern California since 2001. And Regan has also engaged in professional work beyond her day job, including blogging, retweeting, giving the occasional workshop for NAIS, Challenge Success, and even CATDC. So Regan has also given a lot of thought to authentic, equitable assessment. So thank you both so much for joining me. And I'd just like to start by asking you, how are your school years getting underway? And Regan, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having us. So I started with students today, and I feel like I'm a first-year teacher all over again. I have, like Lisa mentioned, I taught math for a large part of my career, and then this year I had the great fortune of returning to humanities, and I'm teaching a 9th grade humanities course, and I'm teaching online like everybody else. And I'm so anxious and nervous and like all the, drinking from a fire hose of resources. And yeah, it's a good challenge, but certainly it's been a different school year.
How about you, Mark?
So yeah, we're we're in day 2 of faculty returning, which is great because I'm just in my first year of being a full-time administrator. So it was interesting to be on campus without the energy of the students. And by on campus, I mean in a Zoom session that looked like on campus. So, we're at that point where there's kind of that nervous energy because nobody quite knows what this year looks like. We have some ideas and things like that. But the excitement for kids to return in any form, right? We're so looking forward to seeing those faces and hearing those giggles and the smiles and finding new ways right now, right? Because that's what we're all trying to do. Finding new ways to recreate those moments that we usually have in person. But we're just excited. I'm like the first time, like Reagan said, a little anxious, right? But the good kind of anxious, like the butterflies, excited for them to come. But let's be honest, a little terrified too because of all the newness. But looking forward to the challenge.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think no matter, even though I taught for 26, 27 years, the first day of classes, I always felt those butterflies in my stomach, and then with so much more to contend with, so much more uncertainty to contend with, new skills, new techniques, etc. There's just that much more, I would imagine. So this is our first cross-regional statewide collaboration in terms of leadership of one of our ongoing groups. And I wonder if you can tell the story, Regan, about how you two know each other. What was the genesis of your deciding to lead this group together?
All right, so I had the great fortune of meeting Mr. Boswell in grad school. We did Klingenstein together and bonded during, what was it, negotiations class?
I believe that was fun.
Probably over a couple of karaoke nights. We had a lot of fun and then continued just to stay in touch after we finished our program. And I think since that time, and even before, we were independently evolving our assessment practices. So when I was at Harvard Westlake, experimented with standards-based grading in my math class. And then Mark started working with Joe Feldman over the last few years. And when Aaron Hoffman said, hey, what do you think about doing a year-long assessment program? Who would you like to facilitate with? I was like, well, Mark, 100% Mark. So I feel like the intersection, sorry, my dog wants to chime in too.
Oh, that's so sweet. The dog likes me too. Oh.
I know. What I'm super excited about is that intersection of, what about grading can be questions and can evolve, and then what about assessment and performance-based assessments can take that evolution even further.
Mm-hmm. Mark, how about you? What are you most excited about in terms of this collaboration with Regan?
Well, I mean, I could talk for quite some time about getting a chance to work with Regan and absorbing some of that knowledge as well. So the first thing, it was like, of course, humbled to work with somebody who's done so much work in this space. So that's thing one. But I'm also really looking forward to, and I know this isn't maybe what people want to hear from facilitators, but I'm so excited to learn from others. And I think that's what this work is actually. I think a lot of people think it may be kind of, we know everything and we're delivering the content and the information, but really it's this kind of co-collaboration, and we're absorbing each other and learning each other. And I think by the end, we all will come out even better at what we're attempting to do. So looking forward to that learning. And let's be honest, like I'm very excited about kind of having this cohort. Some of what Regan was talking about going to grad school, we had a cohort that was very tight knit for 2 years, and understanding that relationship building allowed us to learn in ways that we normally aren't able to do. And I think it's so exciting and so great to be able to build those relationships, because really the work that Regan and I are talking about doing is actually relationship building work, right? We look at assessment and giving grades as relationship building. So just extending that relationship building in so many different ways and showing people that this isn't something tricky. Yeah, there's some terminology, but for the most part, you're just building relationships.
That's so much at the core of what we do at CDC. So CATDC, I can't even say our own name sometimes. So I'm so glad to hear you reference that. And just even digging a little bit more deeper into the content beyond building this cohort, this relationship between the teachers and learners within your group. What do you hope will be the key outcomes for participants, Regan?
Well, first and foremost, we want folks to walk away with equitable grading practices, some that they can implement right away and some that they can kind of chew on for a while. We want our group to feel empowered to elicit, or rather to use assessment practices that elicit and build on student motivation and honor student growth. I think sometimes our teaching hearts, our teaching philosophies can be at odds with assessment practices. And we're going to dig into that history of assessment, and we're going to dig into the myths around assessment and the why behind of assessment, so that we can, invite folks to create an assessment philosophy and practice that match our teaching hearts, that we honor things like care and growth mindset and cultural responsiveness, so that we're not always at odds, internally. And lastly, within that, invitation, I hope is a sense of grace and permission to shift, to say, perhaps this is where I came in with, and this is what I thought assessment was for, and for whatever reason, and go, okay, I have permission to take it a different direction.
That's great. So well said. And that's such a question for so many educators in our schools and beyond independent schools right now. How do we align our deepest values with assessment practices, and giving people the space and the grace to explore this and learn is so important. And Mark, can you speak to the greater urgency around equity and assessment, given COVID-19 and the racial reckoning that we're in at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a big question, and I'm sure we could have a whole other interview just answering that question, right? But before I even get to that, I would just say this urgency was there prior to all of this, right? In normal times, we know that a huge portion of students' kind of self-construct comes from like what happens at school, the feedback that we give them, and what we say is important, right? So this is before we even get to kind of COVID land is what I've been calling it. There has been an urgency prior to this, right? Now, go ahead and add in COVID. Go ahead and add in natural disasters. I don't know if y'all know, but we had a fire NATO around here the other day. Um, Inappropriate uses of power, and we can't avoid, the topic of police brutality and, people being murdered in the streets, right? So, and specifically Black people. So I think all of those things we have to recognize that right now students are experiencing, well, and teachers are experiencing high levels of stress and trauma, right? And we know from research that that high level of stress and trauma is going to affect judgment, and it's going to affect performance, right? And if we're talking about assessing and performance and giving feedback in the form of grades, it's necessary that we really look at the systems that we have inherited, dismantle some of those systems, because some of those systems, the institutional bias is baked right into kind of our traditional grading practices, and dismantle some of those things so that we can actually get to the point where we build authentic relationships that actually take care of people and don't avoid kind of the big topics at hand. So to be honest, I think we're gonna end up asking a lot of questions, and creating more questions. And I say this to my students all the time. Our goal is to push you to the point where you've found an answer, but you're wanting to ask the next best question. And so I think there's a high level of urgency to do that now, even though, like I said, it was a big deal prior to, but now in the space of stress and trauma, we really need to heal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited about the learning that you're going to be able to offer and the space for healing, for questions, for learning. So I so appreciate you taking the time to talk more about this ongoing group with me today. And for all of you out in the community with CATDC, I know that we are in a place of stress, and we are all needing to heal, and it can be challenging to focus on our own learning, but it's deeply important. So take a look at what we have on offer with our ongoing groups. There's 14 of them this year. If it's not time for you to dive into assessment, I'm sure you'll find something else, another learning opportunity with us. And once again, thank you both, and I wish you all the best as you get your school year underway. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.